This week we're going to look at the multi-movement forms of the classical period. We have some pretty large works which are new, like the symphony, and some of these large works have a form built into them in the first movement, and that form is called the Sonata Allegro form. Now, this is kind of confusing. It's possible that we could have a sonata form, which are instrumental movements, multi-movement works, and the first movement of them would also be called the Sonata Allegro. Sonata is a term that the Italians used long ago to make people understand that it wasn't a cantata, which is sung. And so sonata in Italian means really sound, but it's just a form or a type of program that means sound. So these are instrumental programs and instrumental works. So the Sonata Allegro is a single movement form, but it's going to be the first movement of some of those larger forms. Got that? Okay, so the Sonata Allegro is a variation of the ABA form. So an ABA form is an example. For example, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Okay, you sing one line of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, How I Wonder Where You Are, and so on. Then the B part would be up above the sky, world so high, that way, and then it comes back and does Twinkle, Twinkle again. That's just an ABA form, probably one of our simplest. Okay, so we're going to use that form to make a form that will be the first movement of the classical symphony, the sonata, chamber music, and the concerto. Okay, so let's look at some of these works that we're going to add it as the first movement. A classical symphony is new to the classical period. It's a large orchestral work in Haydn's time, maybe 20 minutes. But by the time we get into the Romantic period, we're talking about maybe 90 minutes. So it's a large work, usually in 4 movements. And the movements are fast, slow, and they add a dance as the third movement, and then another fast movement. The sonata is for 1 or 2 instruments. It can be a pretty big work, or it can be a smaller work. And again, it's a multi-movement work. Chamber music was very popular in the classical period. It's written for a small group of instruments. Generally, a classical string quartet is 2 violins, a viola, and a cello. This is another multi-movement work. So let's talk about this form, the Sonata Allegro form, which is going to be part of all of these bigger works. Okay, so now the Sonata Allegro is a single movement ABA, right? So the parts of the Sonata Allegro. We saw these back in the Baroque with the fugue, an exposition where you expose the theme. In this case, we're going to have 2 themes, and they're usually going to be contrasting. The development is much bigger, and the recapitulation is a little more structured. Here's a little diagram. If you remember in the Baroque, we had just the subject, and that was your melody. In this case, we're going to have 2 subjects. And in between, do you see this here? That's a little bridge passage. You need a bridge because you're going to change keys. So you will begin in one, when the subject enters in one key, and you're going to have to find a way to easily make the second subject in another key. So you aren't going to go from one key and go into something else easily. So you have to, what they call modulate, to get you from one subject to the next entrance of it. And that's called the bridge. And then it sort of closes up. Sometimes they even add a little closing section to tell you that that's the end. The development is much larger and it's more structured again. You have to have, again, you do like you did with the fugue, you know, you'll turn it upside down, do it backwards, change keys, but it's just longer and larger. And the recap is very much like the recap in the Baroque period, except it is much longer and it has a closing. And you have two subjects that have to come back. And at the end, you have a coda. And coda in Italian means tail. And the classical period was usually used the coda. And it's a fancy ending. You will think that it's going to stop maybe with this closing, and it's tacked on to the end, called a coda, meaning tail. So let's go here. Okay, we have contrasting moods, and the exposition is so important for you to hear those two themes that it's repeated 2 times, and they are exactly the same. The development, and again, these could be broken into all those parts that we talked about in the fugue. They're called motives now, or motifs, and you can change the texture, make it polyphonic, you can change the rhythm, change the mood, and again, do all the things that you did in the Baroque. The recapitulation, the themes will come back one at a time, and they'll be in the full, you'll hear the full theme, and then the work concludes. So we're going to use it in the first movement of the symphony, we're going to use it in the first movement of the chamber music, the sonata, and even in the classical concerto.